I know where there's some, right here in the hall clerk.
No, Molly, not in there. I have a look.
Hi there, time for an update on the Cobramatic turntable. I put together a new power lead, and the switch, this is the on-off switch right here, and you apply power, or turn off power actually, when this lever is in the off position. This is off, and it depresses this switch right here, this rocker, and then when you turn it on and set a speed, it engages the power and applies it to the motor that's under here. The problem is that this is a little flaky. You hear that interruption in the tone? It's just a continuity test. So the contacts in this switch aren't very good. So what I'm going to do is shut that off because it's irritating. But what I'm going to do is pull the switch. I've already sprayed various concoctions down in there, including deoxit. I'm going to have to try to take that apart, and it's a plastic housing, and can't tell yet how it's going to come apart. So I'll do that, and we'll take a look inside of it. But the drive wheel and wheels, I guess, that's a better way to put it, are finally on their way. It took 10 days for the way it works at the Voice of Music is they have these wheels on hand, but you have to send in your old ones because they have to rebuild them. Now they'll send you a replacement set, not make you wait to rebuild them, but to ensure that they get your old stock in hand, they wait until they receive that before they ship out the new pieces. So it took 10 days for USPS to deliver a first-class package that big to Wisconsin. And they, of course, as soon as they received them, they dropped the new replacement parts in the mail. So those are on the way this morning. So they should be coming soon. But about all I have left to do on this is check out this switch and then realign everything. When you take all of this apart this is the drive for the tone arm. When you take all this apart to clean it up to make it do what it's supposed to, like everything moves easily now, you'll have to realign, most likely, unless you're really careful. You'll have to realign where everything, the lift point for the tone arm, how the tone arm rotates depending on the size of the record you pick, so on and so forth. So we'll go through that as this progresses. But let's start with that. All right, the switch is out. This is a normally closed switch. As you turn the turntable off, a lever pushes this rocker in and opens the switch and cuts off current to the motor. It's held together. It's held together by these two rivets, and I've been mulling over how to do this because I don't have any rivets. Period. Particularly don't have any rivets that size. But I'm lucky enough to have a set of small screws left over from a 3D printing project a few years back. And it looks to me like they're close enough they'll fit in the hole. So what I'm going to do, this is the side that fits against the chassis. So this is hidden. You can see from the underside of the turntable this, From the top, all you see is the switch itself. So what I'm going to do is take my old broken file and file these off. That should allow this plate to come up, and given my track record with things with springs, should allow everything to spring out of there and fall all over the place, including down on the floor where the floor monsters get them. But that's what I'm going to do anyway. Well, actually, I might do that with the Dremel. Be faster. I'll do that. I'll shut the camera off and go grind these away and be back holding it together like this to keep it from exploding. Okay, I've got those ground down. And as I said, this will be against the middle of the turntable, so they shouldn't show the scars I just made. Now let the adventure begin. I take a small screwdriver right up in there and pry without breaking this phenolic. Will be the trick. Maybe a palette knife for starters. This is an artist's tool, and I'm not an artist, but boy, it's handy. It's spring steel, very thin. You can get it into some really thin places. It's good for cabinet repair too. You can smear glue in between a couple of joints pretty easily with this. And you can do things like pry on switches. So what I have to remember is that this slope part goes this way, and the curved part goes to the nearer screw hole for orientation. The second thing I have to remember is to not let this pop into 1,000 pieces when it comes apart. So that's one side. That was easy. Let's see. Is the other side going to be as easy? Yeah, it looks all right. Yes. Okay. The question is, can I just pull this up without this springing off into the wilds? The answer is sort of. Okay. Alright, there's the switch that keeps it closed. It pivots obviously on this pin.
But that ain't the way I heard it.
And down in here, take the spring out. Down in here's a lot of oil. Look at that. I wonder why that is. Although I said I sprayed a lot of stuff in there, all I really sprayed in there was deoxit. So these two contact pads go through the plastic and come out here. So these are your solder points. Oh, this is the shorting bar. I see. So it's an interesting and cheap switch technology. This little bar right here touches either the top side or the underside. I think it's the underside. So this is normally closed. When it's depressed, that little bar sinks down and no longer shorts these two contacts. So the bar has to be without corrosion. It is just a little pin. It's all corroded. And the underside of these guys need to be corrosion free too. So isn't that going to be interesting to clean? Is up under there. probably, if there was no solder residue on here, these might just pull out, so you could clean them. But like that. So one is willing, the other is not. I could probably force the issue. What I will do is pull this one so I can see up under there. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. Let me get something for the camera to focus on. Right there is that dark spot right here. That's where the pin's been touching, and that's what's corroded. So as I said, it's an interesting, cheap design. Obviously not built to be fixed, but we're going to fix it anyway. So what I'll do is polish that up with a really little, like 600 or 800 grit emery paper. I'll replace it. I'll give this one a little bit of a chance to come out. And if not, I'll rig some contraption so I can get some emery paper up under the underside of this guy. And give that a clean too. And see if I can remember how to reassemble it, as usual. Well, I have to apologize for the sound on this video. I don't know what's going on. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Anyway, here I've polished up the contacts from the underside with, turned out to be 1600 grit, very fine emery paper. Got them both cleaned up so they're nice and shiny. Also cleaned up the little bridging rod that fits through the plastic. So that's all shiny and clean and ready to be put back in. What else? The rivets, what I'm going to have to do with these, it turns out, is what I did with them was the little rivets pop right out, of course, because they're ground away, but the screws were a bit too small for the holes, so I had to enlarge the holes and grind away a bit of the side of the plastic there for the screw head to fit into. But it worked in the end, as you'll see. Alright, I have widened the holes so that they will accept the screw. And I had to actually excavate a little bit of material right there so the screw head would fit pretty flat. Also in the base plate I had to widen these holes here so the screws would go through. And now I need to assemble this. Alright, they're both in. The spring, if you happen to do this, notice that the spring has a narrow end and a wide end. The narrow end fits on a pin right down in there, plastic pin. And the spring will actually reside at an angle rather than being straight up and down. But first, before we do that, I have to put our little contact pin back in the rocker switch itself. So it goes like that. That fits down in here, like that. Oop, backwards. Try that again. It's down in there like that. Then the spring fits in there. Fiddly bits. spring fits right down in here. It touches against this flat spot. You can see in this part right there. And then this pin just sits right there. That, of course, will be held in place by the by this plate. But that's it. It's back together, sort of. So this will go on there. All right. Multimeter set to continuity test. It'll beep if it makes contact, and again, the way this works is when it's open, it's making contact. When the lever pushes this down, it breaks contact. So that's a good sign, and that's a good sign. We're good. We are good. All right. I'll put it back. Okay, some progress on the turntable. I got the switch after we cleaned it and made it more operable back in. I've added the power cord, new cord, rewired the motor and the secondary winding that powers the solenoid, or the electromagnet, I should say. And good news is the rollers came in from VM Audio Enthusiasts, Voice of Music folks, in Northville, MI. So that's good. We'll take a look at those. This is the idler wheel that goes between the platter and the drive wheel. If I can get this bag open. It's the price of not having fingernails in particular. Now, clearly what they're doing, and it's the only way they could do it actually, is they're taking used parts. You send yours in, and they send you some others that they have refurbished. But they're taking used parts and applying new rubber. So this is the idler wheel. We'll put that in a second. Here's the drive wheel. Again, it's a used part that's been reconditioned with new rubber, so it looks great. The idler wheel sits right on top of this. As this spins, as the drive wheel spins, the idler wheel spins too. So let's put those in and see how it looks. We'll start with the drive wheel. And the drive wheel mounts into this bracket that goes right there. So I don't know. I think I'll have to take the motor back off of its mount to get that in, which is relatively straightforward. That's how straightforward it is. So I'll apply a little oil to this shaft right here. I'll do it with this hand, and maybe you can see what I'm doing. wonder if that shouldn't be greased at the very tip. It sits on the point of the shaft. Let me look. One of the pieces of documentation that I managed to acquire, and it's available through the Radio Museum, radiomuseum.org, is the lubrication points for the turntable. Yeah, they have they refer to stay put grease and stay put oil. So it's oil and grease that stays where you put it, I guess. So they're putting oil on the idler wheel. I can't see from this. Oh, here it is. This side. This is where our drive wheel is, and they don't say. They don't say what to do. So I'll leave it like I have it. I may have to change it at some point. In any case, the drive wheel, this fits right in there. Oh, it's spring loaded. I didn't realize that. Huh. Interesting. Now I really don't see what's going to keep it from rubbing on here. Maybe it's the downward pressure of the idler wheel, which goes right here, but mounts from the top side. We'll take a look at that, see what it looks like. Anyway, this goes right here. Then I'll put the motor back on. By the way, if you've looked at this and wondered what this brass knurled threaded rod is for, it's actually a shipping bolt nut, I guess, better way to put it. And this is shipped. You don't want this motor flopping around, bashing into the drive wheel. So there's a hole right here. The sole purpose is to bring a screw or bolt through and fasten to that and tie the motor into the off position and keep it from drifting around. So if you ever happen to want to ship one of these, make sure you put a new bolt in there to hold this motor in place so it doesn't do a bunch of damage in transit, because it's heavy enough to do that. Alright, now we'll turn it over. I'm going to remount my legs on the other side so it's easier. Okay. The drive wheel's in there now. I've got to I don't even recall why I put this tape on there. Oh, it was to hold that felt washer in place. Okay. So this gets oiled. The felt washer gets oiled. And this just, this sharp end rubs up against this spring right here. The spring holds it that way and allows it to freewheel and stay in place. But stay in place at the same time. And some oil on here. A bit of oil here. I think that's an oil. I don't know if that's an oil port. Yeah, it is. That's an oil point. Right through that little hole. We'll oil this later. It should spin freely, and it does. This goes back over here. When you do oil that felt, make sure you don't put so much on that it drips down onto here, because it obviously won't work after that. Now, what's holding that up? Oh, I see, it's the motor. Okay. So that's the way it goes together. Again, I don't see how this doesn't rub. In fact, I can hear it rubbing on there. Huh. Doesn't quite make any sense to me. Well, we'll run it after a while and see what happens. When you put the motor back in, one of the things to look for is, well, first of all, here's the on-off switch that got refurbished. When this is pushed to the off position, current is broken here and the motor stops running up. To the on position, the motor starts up, and then you pick the record speed based on this idler wheel works against the drive wheel. And one other thing that happens when you turn this off is there's a tab on this plate. There's a tab right there that pushes on another tab on the motor, and it swings the motor away from, well, heck, can't see it. I'm telling you something and I can't show it to you, so I will loosen this up and we'll be able to see it. this tab right here, pushes on this tab right here in the motor, and swings the drive away from the drive wheel. This is the axle of the motor, and when it's in off, that doesn't touch. And coincidentally, that's when the shipping bolt aligns too. So you put a shipping bolt in there, and it will hold the motor in place and away from the drive wheel. That way you don't get divots in the drive wheel. A little bit of grease on the bottom of this to allow it to slide in this bracket. That fits around there. And these get tightened back down. The only thing that holds this in place is the spring plate. Yeah, I'm still baffled by the clearing or lack thereof. So those are in place. I have cleaned every joint in this radio, or the turntable, took most of them apart, cleaned up all the old grease, and my favorite solvent for cleaning up old grease is WD-40. It has some solvent in it that really does the job. Alcohol won't touch a lot of this stuff. Somebody talked about using lacquer thinner, and lacquer thinner will just remove paint. it won't cut the grease, as far as I can tell. Anyway, so I have not lubed the ones on the top of the turntable. I've just lubed the ones on the bottom of the turntable. The thing that holds the records down is polished up pretty nicely, except I got fingerprints all over it. It's got tape on it too. But that looks pretty good. So it's a real simple mechanism that just fits down in there, and then has a C-clip, circlip that keeps it in there, like that. So let's go over the lube points since we've got the top up. Let's go over the lube points on the upper part of the deck. I can find that again. Oh, here. And the orientation is about like that. And it calls for oil on this joint. Oil, this is, and you can probably barely see it, but there is a toothed, plastic toothed gear right there. It's an offset, the center is offset, so it's eccentric gear. That needs to be oiled. Drop of oil there. The bearings, which are under here, for the platter are here, so that needs to be greased. That bearing does. Grease goes on the bottom of this sliding rail, as I said, and then oil here. And you can oil the shaft through that small hole, but you still have to put a drop of oil right on the end here, and again, without dropping any oil on the drive wheel. And that's it for the upper deck. One other thing about, I took this all apart and cleaned it up. The plastic on this turntable is cleaning just fabulously well. It just looks almost like new. So that's good. There is a ball bearing. This central shaft of the tone arm sits on a ball bearing. It's a washer, ball bearing washer, as is this. So make sure when you are cleaning things up, you take this out and remember the order in which the pieces go, and grease that ball bearing as well as cleaning all the old gunk off. Oh, and they also call for a little fine instrument oil in here, no surprise. Okay, that's kind of it for the top side. I will go ahead and oil these points off camera. You don't have to watch that, but this is what I use. Here we are back on the underside. By the way, this is the shaft is the tone arm shaft, and when you this dismantles, there's a set screw here to hold this piece on, and then this is free turning, but it comes next. There's some felt in here to make sure that this doesn't get hung up on this piece. This is part of the record changer business. As the tone arm swings in toward the center of the record and hits and starts doing its little bounce on, I don't know, pretty early generation 78s and everything after that. That little bounce is what works this arm over. It has a silver plated rod right here, and another one here. And as soon as that makes contact with this switch, it throws the electromagnet here, pulls this over, and forces it to change to start the next record's change cycle. So underneath that is a Batman-looking piece of metal, and that has to do, I think, if I remember, yes, with the record diameter selector. That's what this is. If you'll notice right here, this bracket is stepped. It has 3 steps in it, and that's what changes where the tone arm swings all the way out to allow a record to drop, and then it comes in to, what is it, 12, 10, and 7.5, whatever it is. Those 3 positions, and those are all set by these steps in this plate right here. So that's the next part on this stack of stuff, and then and this, by the way, is it right? Yes, this has 2 set screws in it, and once you take those 2 set screws out, the tone arm will try to fall out. So be careful about that. The other thing, if you want to remove the tone arm, is you have to remove the wires that lead to the cartridge. Those anchor here, and then they go from here on to onto the amplifier. Pretty straightforward stuff. The lube points on this are I want you to grease this pin. This is the solenoid, the electromagnet that trips the next record change event. You want that greased. Don't know why. They want any place where there's something sliding, and there's a sliding piece right there. That gets greased. And I use white lithium grease because it's a lightweight grease, and I can put it in these injectors. It's thin enough that I can get it through one of those and reach some faraway places, and not have to apply a ton of it to do the job. More grease on this because this slides. Grease. Oh, there is a brake, of all things. That brake, and it's a really hefty spring, and that brake is what is keeping the tone arm flopping around right now. So the brake is set. If you remove the brake, I think I might be able to do it by hand. If I can find it, there it is. tone arm and then is free, which makes sense. So the brake just keeps it locked down while it's supposed to be off to the side, waiting for the next record drop. You don't want it drifting over and getting in the way when you're dropping a 78, the next 78 in the stack down. So that's the brake. It's a bit of grease. It's just a fork like this that pushes up against a shaft like that. And you want a bit of grease on the inside of that, but not much. A little bit of grease and another sliding bracket here. More grease over here where this lever goes under this big gear. Sliding surfaces in here some more, get the grease treatment. And that's it for the bottom side of the deck. Try not to have any parts left over. That's my best advice. Keep track of what it came off of, take lots of reference photos, and remember where you took all the parts off of, because you're gonna need them. So, point in fact, I have at this moment a spring and two C-clips, or circlips. I know where one of the circle clips goes. It goes right on here to hold this hefty spring down. I'm just going to have to remember, I think, another circlip. Don't remember. Anyway, I've got to find a home for these parts before I can say it's probably done. But when I do, we'll apply some power to this end and see if it works. That's what we'll do. It came to me why this doesn't rub. This is the drive wheel, and why it doesn't rub on there. And it's obvious once you think about it for more than 10 seconds, and that is on this side, the platter sits right here and pushes it down. So there's pressure from the platter pushing down on the idler wheel, which, because the drive wheel is spring mounted, it just sinks a little bit, which is fine. That works. So I don't think I have anything left to do on here. What I'll do is put the platter in. Well, first of all, I'll talk about what's going on up here, which I've done mostly. It's pretty simple on top. It's actually pretty simple underneath too. But I'll talk about how it's working up here, and then I'll put the platter on and we'll turn it over. Well, I'll try to describe a record change cycle for you. So let me do that. First of all, let's start here. Two levers. All that's up here is the tone arm, the thing that holds the records down. This guy, which I can't remember if it should be loose or not. I'll have to see. The speed off and then speed, which we've covered multiple times, and the record size, which we covered last time too. So that's all that's up here. I'll turn it over and we'll talk about the other things that are going on the bottom. And the first thing to talk about, I guess, is this record size. One second. This is the plate that describes what's going on. 3 record sizes. I can't remember what I said the other day, or the other hour, or the other minute about this, but it's 7-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch records. And there is a manual position. The manual position is all the way in, like that, which means nothing automatic happens. The platter just starts to turn. You lift the tone arm and set it down on the record wherever you want. At this point, nothing. Then 7-inch, as I described previously, there are steppers right here for 7-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch records. And that just determines how far the tone arm comes back in at the end of a cycle. So there are two actions that will cause a record change cycle. The first, and they both do exactly the same thing, but in different ways. The first is this switch is the change record switch, and it's a push switch. It's not a back and forth. It looks like it should slide, but it doesn't. So you push that down. That grounds, right here you can see it grounds, shorts these two and grounds the one side of this coil. The other side is provided by the 5.6 or 6.7 or whatever the voltage is off the secondary winding here. And it energizes the core in this coil, and that trips this little plastic gizmo. And that allows the record, I'm not sure I'm turning this the right direction, but that allows this see, perhaps you can see the tone arm is off to the side, out of the way. The brake is set so it doesn't flop around. That's the brake right here. And then this mechanism lifts a rod inside inside the spindle, and allows a new record to fall down. And then it keeps going. And at this point, it will drag. This will come back in, and we're ready for another cycle. Now, as the tone arm, you'll notice that there's a friction fit here between the tone arm and this brass-looking piece. It isn't really brass. But the reason is that right here and here are two contacts. This one runs through here and is grounded to the chassis. This one is on the same ground side of the electromagnet, and here's the hot wire coming in. And as I'm doing this slightly wrong, but as the tone arm, here's an example here. As the tone arm, there's newer, as in 1930 or so, maybe even earlier than that, but newer 78s. I don't know if you can see that groove, but there's a groove that goes in, and what it does is, once the record is finished playing, the needle follows this groove in here and then just starts to go back and forth. And as it goes back and forth, it starts to work this thing over until it grounds that contact right there. When it grounds that contact, it grounds one side of the coil, the other side is hot, energizes the electromagnet again, and the whole cycle starts all over again. So that's kind of fundamentally how it works. The alignment business of keeping the tone arm aligned with where it should be on this, because as you can see, I move this fairly freely. It has a felt pad in there to provide some friction so that it isn't just flopping around. But these elements do have to be realigned when you take it apart, so that the tone arm comes down at 7, 10, or 12. What else has to be adjusted? We might have to do something with this part of the record changer. We'll see. So what I'll do is move my legs back around to this side, I still haven't hooked up the cartridge or the wire that runs from here over to the radio chassis, but we don't need it for this part of the work. So I'll stop here and move the legs, and we'll continue. Okay, we're back to the top. The next thing to do is put the bearing back. But first, a little lubrication. As I said, I use white lithium because it's easy to work with, and it's decent. It works. Everybody has their own choices about this stuff. As the Bob Ross used to say, it's your own little world, you make it any way you want. And that's kind of true. Never thought I'd think of Bob Ross as a great American philosopher, but there you go. All right, let me grab the platter. It's here somewhere. Here we go. I've scrubbed this up so it's not oily anymore. Couldn't get all the rubber tracks off, but so be it. I am going to put a little oil inside this bushing because it probably needs it. And I'm going to put some white lithium on this gear because this gear is what drives the big round one we saw on the bottom. So I'll put a little lithium on there. The deal with oil is less is better, generally speaking, unless it's going into your oil case on your car. And although if you overfill that too, I think you're in trouble, just as much trouble overfilled as underfilled. Probably more. No, probably not more. Equally disastrous in either case. Yeah, it looks like the gear spacing with relative to the bearing will put the run of this gear right in here. Right in here, so that's where the grease will go. Okay. First thing we had to test, I guess, the motor is working okay. The motor has the oomph to drive this platter. So I'll set that up and I'll be right back. Alright, pretty much the same setup as we had before. Variac. And by the way, that is not an isolation transformer, that's just Variac. Variacs are almost never isolation transformers. To be safest, if you were going to do anything like this, you would want an isolation transformer in front of or behind the Variac. But in this case, I'm pretty confident how I wired it, and I've got neutral running to ground, so it should be alright. Alright, let's see if we turn a turntable. This is the on-off switch, on-off and speed. Yeah, there it goes. It's loud. It's louder than I would like. What I don't know is how loud it was in the first place. My guess is pretty. So that's 78 RPMs, and as you move this way, slows it, slows it, slows it. And at this point, the audio dropped out entirely. Got a serious problem I'm going to have to deal with. regarding that, and again I apologize that the audio in this whole video sucks. But okay. So the next thing to do is to check where the tone arm. Remember, this turntable is sized for 3 record diameters: 7-inch, 10-inch, and 12-inch. 12-inch is the equivalent of a 33 1/3. 10 inches is 78, and a 7-inch is a 45 RPM. So we're going to try that with a 12-inch. This is an ancient. This is actually the 33 1/3 that came with the turntable. It's really dirty, but it doesn't matter because there's no cartridge in the cartridge is removed from the tone arm, and we can just check and see where it lands. So I've turned the speed down to about 33. It doesn't really matter. Here push the change button, and the tone arm thinks 12 inches is way below the frame that you can see. So we know that's not going to work right. The whole point of this is that the tone arm now needs to be aligned with the record size change. Here it's set to a 10-inch and it lands on a 12-inch edge. So that's okay. I expected this because I took it all apart and couldn't align it exactly the same way that it was when I took the before I took the tone arm apart. So it's okay. So what we'll do in the next video is go ahead and align the tone arm. See you next time.